Hi there, I'm meteorologist Corey Thompson here in the TV9 newsroom. Going to give you a little update on the winter weather situation we have facing eastern Iowa over the next 24 to 36 hours, let's say. That's a pretty broad timeline, and we'll narrow it down for you here in just a moment. But we do have the potential for freezing rain, which could easily cause some pretty treacherous travel conditions, especially later tonight into your Saturday morning. So if you had plans during that time frame, you'll want to listen. You'll want to make sure to be giving at least some consideration to altering those plans in some of that time. Now let's take a look here. At what we've got going here in eastern Iowa. Ice storm warning in effect for the area you see here highlighted in that purplish color. That includes Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Waterloo. It's all of these counties here that you see right here in the heart of the TV9 viewing area. That goes into effect later tonight into the day on Saturday. Winter weather advisory for the areas surrounding it. That will be in effect as well. All of this is covering the potential for that freezing rain as a storm system moves into the region. Now that system is still off to our southwest. A look at our surface map at this hour shows an area of low pressure in western Kansas and a frontal boundary extending out in front of it. That boundary actually is kind of our key player here in this weather situation. It will be lifting slowly to the north just a little bit, but not by much. And so as it does, you can see this boundary stretching through southern Missouri into the Ohio Valley. That's what's going to have the focus for the precipitation that will be moving in. It's going to shift to the north, and as warm air comes up and over that boundary, it's going to create the conditions necessary for freezing rain. Now, why do we see freezing rain in these situations? I'll show you why. We do have an area of that warm air aloft. If it was thick enough, it would just be plain rain, as long as it extended all the way down to the surface, and that would keep us from seeing any sort of icy outcome. Unfortunately, we're not going to see that immediately. That will be where we'll be at later on Saturday across much of the TV9 viewing area, but initially that area of warm air will be off the surface. It'll be pretty broad in terms of how high up it goes. That allows the precipitation to fall as liquid through most of the atmosphere, but right near the surface where we live, there will be enough cold air to allow that precipitation to freeze again as it touches something. Not enough cold air that it freezes before it touches the surface, but as it comes in contact with pavement, trees, railings, other areas, we will see that develop, and we will see that ice start to accumulate. Now, if that layer were thick enough, if that cold air extended higher up in the atmosphere, we would have a situation where sleet could develop. Liquid precipitation freezes again before hitting the ground. That's when you get those ice pellets that can pile up and still cause some very slick roads, but it does at least cause less in the way of sort of damage to trees potentially and other such concerns. Now, we are also keeping an eye on the potential for some snow to mix in. That's when the entire atmosphere from bottom to top is below freezing, and that precipitation is able to stay in the form of snowflakes as it comes down. Satellite and radar view at this hour shows things are dry across eastern Iowa, but as we pull back, we see that first sign of the storm system off to our south. Precipitation in eastern Oklahoma toward western Missouri and western Arkansas is providing that opportunity. So let's step through on Pinpoint Futurecast in terms of what we can expect over the next several hours. For the afternoon, not a lot. That's the good news. As we go through toward 9 o'clock, though, notice that we will have some precipitation starting to kick in. That's when we see the initial stage of it in our western counties. Now, as we go into the latter portion of the evening, into the early overnight hours, that's when we could see a little bit of precipitation become a bit more widespread. And that's when the trouble will really begin to start. We're going to have air temperatures still in the 20s at this point, but those temperatures just off the surface warm enough that this will be falling as liquid precipitation. Now, as it continues to hit the ground, it will start to accumulate as ice. Notice by 4 o'clock, most of the area still seeing that frozen wintry mix. And even as we get towards 7 o'clock, only some of our far southern counties will begin to see that precipitation change over to rain. So as the temperature moves at or above 32 degrees, and by about 7 o'clock, that's about where that line will be, we are going to see conditions improve. But until it does, freezing rain, slick spots, still expected. Now, as we go toward the afternoon hours of Saturday, we're expecting things to start to improve for more areas. That's where you see this rain represented by the green color on your screen encompass more of our counties. I really do think pretty close to the Highway 20 corridor is where we're going to see that improvement. So Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, as we get toward the noon hour, we should start to see our road conditions get better. But areas to the north, notice that you stay north of that line even into the afternoon, a mix of snow and maybe a bit of freezing rain and maybe a bit of rain mixed in as well will continue to cause some of that trouble. Unfortunately, that is going to continue even into the evening hours in some of those spots as cold air stays up and stubborn in those counties, and that could cause those road conditions to stay poorer longer. Now, by Sunday night, all of the area will start to see those conditions improve, and we will see dry conditions to wrap up the weekend. In terms of how much we can see, our ice accumulation looking to be in the range of about 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, or even just slightly more within that darker band. So between Charles City down toward just north of Oskaloosa and to the east, that includes Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Washington, you're on the edge of this, Dubuque, Manchester, all included in this potential for getting a couple of 1/10 of an inch of ice. Now outside of that, the lighter pink shows where an area of about a trace to just 1/10 of an inch of ice will be possible, but even that is plenty to cause plenty of problems in terms of our road conditions and where you're headed out and about. Now, snow will also be a possibility with this, more confined to our northern zones and fairly limited in terms of how much will stick, but anything is going to add to the trouble in terms of getting around and driving. Now, one thing that I do want you to be cognizant of as we go through the next several hours is that things are pretty breezy. Now, these easterly winds are actually helping to keep our temperatures on the cooler side initially as the system moves through. Those easterly winds will also be a contributing factor that could cause some of our tree branches, maybe some of our power lines to get damaged, especially when you get those higher gusts. Now, you get a tree limb that falls onto a power line, that's how you could get some of that unfortunate situation where you have a little damage to that line, a little bit of a power outage. Don't think it's going to be extremely widespread with the amounts of freezing rain we're expecting, but it is a possibility. Again, right in that corridor where some of that heaviest freezing rain is possible is where we could see the biggest issues from this. So we do want you to be ready. Think about what you need to do to prepare for that potential for a power outage. Maybe have your cell phone charged, other devices that you want to make sure to have charged. Do that this evening. Make sure to keep them plugged in until the power goes out, if it does. Not a bad idea to have some candles or flashlights ready, just those things that you need just in case your home is too dark before the sun comes up. Again, not expecting this to be extremely widespread, but the possibility is there, and that is one of the potential hazards that you get when you have these ice storm situations. Now, another potential hazard is to people driving. We really do want you just to kind of consider avoiding travel during this time. If you are heading out tonight, now if you get to your destination before 9 or 10 o'clock in eastern Iowa, you'll be in pretty good shape. Now if you're traveling to the west, that's going to be where you could run into some of that precipitation a little bit earlier. We wouldn't necessarily recommend that. If you're traveling to the north tomorrow, again, that trickier road condition stays a little bit longer. So even though conditions may improve where you are, you'll have to look ahead and check things out. That's where the KCRG TV9 First Alert Weather app comes in handy. If you scroll down a little bit on that home screen on your app, you'll see a big button that says road conditions, and that'll take you right to the Iowa DOT. They'll give you the latest information to where the slickest spots are developing for areas like that. Now, another thing to keep in mind, it's pretty hazardous for walking around in these types of conditions too. So there is a way to make that a little bit better. It's going to sound a little bit silly, but it's something to keep in mind. It's called the penguin waddle, and we want you to consider employing this. If you don't have, especially, I know they make those special things you can put on your shoes or boots to make them get a little extra traction in ice. If you don't have those kinds of spikes, then this is obviously going to be most helpful to you. Yeah, we just want you to make sure to employ this tactic potentially. Use your balance. Keep your knees relaxed though. We don't want you to be too rigid with this. Keep your toes pointed outward and take small and slow steps on the ice. Make sure that your hands are free. Don't put them in your pockets. Helps you with your balance. If there's a railing nearby, make sure to use that too. Now those railings could be icy as you're walking along the sidewalk or up a row of stairs, but anything helps. It's certainly going to be better. Now, one thing to consider that you could do that keeps you a little bit safer is walk on the grass. Even though that will also be covered in ice, it probably will be giving you a little bit more traction. There will be space in between those blades of grass that have ice on them, and as you step on it, you'll probably be able to crunch some of that ice down, and that will help. Just a little bit of extra traction helps there as opposed to the really smooth pavement if it's not treated. Now, if you have salt down, or many area roadways will be treated with brine before this. So that should help things, but it's not going to make it perfect. And we really just want you to treat any sort of area that looks wet as potentially icy over the next little while. That is something to keep an eye out for. Now, we've had a couple questions today. Ice storm warning. How common is this around eastern Iowa? Well, the answer is not very. It's been a while since we've actually seen one issued. First of the season this year, we did not see one last year at all, and we did not see one for most of the previous season. So the last ice storm warning in eastern Iowa was actually last February 2023 on February 22nd. About the same areas, actually, the viewing area had that ice storm warning in effect. And so we're seeing it again, but it's been a little while. So we haven't had to deal with this type of ice for some time. Let's recap. Ice storm warning in effect for the darker purple counties on your screen. That includes Waterloo, down towards Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. Points to the west, including Marshalltown, Grinnell. Right between the Interstate 80 and Highway 20 corridor is where we're expecting the potentially worst ice to take place. In terms of timing, the rest of the daytime hours for your Friday will be clear of any of this precipitation. We are expecting conditions to start to deteriorate a bit as we head toward later tonight. Notice by 9 o'clock. Areas along and west of Interstate 35 starting to see a little bit of that mix of some icy conditions, a little bit of snow. To the east of that, we're waiting maybe a couple more hours after that. Midnight and beyond is really going to be the prime time here for this precipitation as it continues to stream to the northeast. Pretty widespread freezing rain looks pretty likely as you wake up. And Pinpoint Futurecast depicting a lot of this as snow. I think we're still going to have enough warm air left that much of this will be more of the freezing rain variety. That continues into the mid-morning hours for many of us, but by about noon, again, we're emphasizing that the chance for conditions to improve along and south of Highway 20 starts to look a lot better. So areas around Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Washington, for sure by that time, will have just plain rain and temperatures above freezing. That means that conditions will continue to improve there too, which is great to see. As we head into the afternoon hours, again, that split. Northern zones looking potentially a bit more wintry, southern and central zone looking a little bit better, and then we see conditions improve everywhere by Saturday night into Sunday as temperatures generally stay above freezing. In terms of total ice accumulation, 1/10 of an inch, it seems like a pretty good number for a lot of us. There could be increased amounts in our central zone in particular, right where that ice storm warning was in effect. Up to 1/4 of an inch of ice is possible there, and that does cause some trouble. That could bring down some tree limbs. That could cause some isolated power outages in a few spots. Snowfall, less of a concern with this system, but there could be some that accumulates, especially in our northern zones. 1 inch or so is a possibility there. Of course, this is all coming with the potential for ice too, so all of this contributing to very poor travel conditions as we look ahead. That's your update for the midday portion of Friday. We're going to have an additional update here on our streaming platforms coming up at 6:30. Of course, we are also available at 4, 5, and 6 o'clock tonight. That will give you the latest information on KCRG TV9. We'll also have the latest information on KCRG.com throughout and the KCRG TV9 First Alert Weather app. Lots of ways to get our information to you, and we thank you for taking it. We thank you for also watching today, and we thank you for please staying safe. Avoid travel if you can, and consider others as you head out and about. Thanks for watching. Have a great afternoon.